Hello? Hi, we're going to be starting in a couple minutes. If you need colloquia credit with ESS, that sign-up sheet is in the back.
Yeah, Charlie!
Okay, I hope it's up to expectation.
Hello, Hi, my name is Charlie T.A., and I'm the Student Body Academic Chair for Associated Student Government. Thank you all for coming to the last lecture series. This is a program brought to you by ASG every quarter, where we come to honor exceptional faculty or staff members who are leaving the university. This is inspired by the prompting question: if this were the last time to address a group of students, what would you want them to say? Today, John Farnsworth will answer us that question. John Farnsworth, Senior Faculty Lecturer for Environmental Studies and Sciences, also serves as Provost Faculty Associate for Curriculum Development and Transformation, as Faculty Director in Residence for Sci-Fi Residential Learning Community, and as Faculty Associate for the Center for Sustainability. He will retire from teaching this coming summer after 21 years in the classroom, 14 years of those years at SCU. Dr. Farnsworth holds a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from Antioch University, an interdisciplinary Master's of Liberal Arts from Stanford University, and both a Master's and Doctorate in Philosophy from the University of Stirling in Scotland. In 2016, Dr. Farnsworth was awarded the Dr. David E. Lagathetti Teaching Award, the highest award for teaching given at SCU College of Arts and Sciences. Dr. Farnsworth will be turning 64 on the 1st of June, and on that day he will be reading from his forthcoming book, Codes of Departure, Field Notes from the Sea of Cortez, at an Environmental Studies Colloquium. The book will be published in November by Cornell University Press. His wife of 40 years, Carol Farnsworth, who has lived with Dr. Farnsworth in Swig Hall for the past 12 years, joins us this evening. Without further ado, I give you.
You really should stand up. Come on, stand up. This is the first time I've ever lectured to a dog, so special thanks for everyone for coming out, especially Jacob, who lives across the hall from me on the 11th floor of Swin. Did you notice my joke up there? You did, because you've written books, right? So, anybody else? When you when you do copy editing with like a real copy editor, they'll put a slash through anything they want to change. So my title is on revision, and it's being revised. But then underneath it, where you put the angle brackets, I have the word "stet," which is Latin. It means "let it stand," which is a way for the author to tell the editor, "Don't change that." But of course, I made the change, so maybe. It's going to be a really long lecture until you laugh at my jokes. So last lecture, I've had some friends who have done this over the years, and it's all fake lecture because it's not really their last lecture. People younger than me are doing this. But tonight is going to be a little unique because this really is my last lecture. Part of that is because I don't lecture much anymore. I know my students sitting here are probably going, yeah, right. But, you know, I mean, I found that people learn a little bit more by doing than listening. Yeah, is that former students are nodding? But I'm at a point in the school year where from here we have a couple discussions and reviews for the midterm, and student presentations, and then peer editing, and then the party, right? Are we going to have a party? So, yeah. So this really is my last lecture at SCU. Here's my favorite lecture hall. It is on a beach in Baja, on Isla Espiritu Santo. I love lecturing in Barranquilla. I want you to take a good look at this head. See that hat and the sunglasses? Memorize that because you're going to see that head again but with a different body. Okay. So I am retiring, as Charlie told you. Here's where I'm retiring to. In Washington State. In the San Juan Islands. Carol and I bought a little retirement cabin. And you can't really see that. I just took this with my iPhone the day I first saw it. There's a trailer here that's gone now. That was a construction trailer. And I'm building a little writer shack there. So this is my little writer place. Anyway, I want you, these are Douglas firs, most of them. A few red cedars out of the frame. But I want you to imagine yourself for a moment in a forest. I always, let me put it this way. In 14 years teaching here at SCU, I've never done a class without starting with a poem. And this poem will have you lost in the forest. So take a second. Put yourself in your own forest. This poem is by David Wagoner, and it's called Lost. Stand still. The trees ahead and the bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here. And you must treat it as a powerful stranger, must ask permission to know it and be known. The forest breathes. Listen. It answers, I have made this place around you. If you leave it, you may come back here again, saying, here. No two trees are the same to raven. No two branches are the same to men. If what a tree or a bush does is lost on you, you are surely lost. Stand still. The forest knows where you are. You must let it find you. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about revision this evening I'm basically a writing instructor, for those of you who have never heard me lecture before. And of course, revision is a key element of that process. I think revision is also part of living in life. We get to revise who we are constantly. I think the neat thing about being a millennial, and I'm just guessing here, is you're going to have to do that a lot of times in your lives. When I got my BA in 1975, it was kind of assumed that whatever I started doing, I was going to do until the age I'm at now. That changed for me after about 15 years. My first career, I was a youth worker. I did a lot of work on legislation and policy, juvenile justice and delinquency prevention, and runaway and homeless youth and stuff like that. That's a high burnout occupation. After about 15 years, I was really ready to be done. And suddenly I found myself teaching, which I never thought I'd do. I was teaching high school. I did that for 7 years. And that got kind of old. Back to graduate school and then suddenly teaching in college. So many changes since 1975. The college I graduated from did not own a computer at all. The registrar's office, the library, you looked in little cards, card catalogs, wooden cases. The idea of having so much power in my pocket with my iPhone. This is normal to you guys, right? And I'm teaching in a study, environmental studies, that didn't even exist when I was an undergraduate. That's going to be normal for you guys too. I remember the first time our department, after I'd been in it some years, hired somebody who actually had a PhD in environmental studies. He's sitting right here right now, Dr. Bacon. It was like, oh my God. Because all the rest of us had weird degrees from weird, whatever. And we were kind of faking it, right? So revision is going to be a big part of your lives, whether you want it or not. And I see revision as kind of a difficult process, and maybe that's a good thing. Whether we're talking about writing or we're talking about life. So I'm going to give you a few hints on how I see it done. I want to start. This is a view out of our apartment in Swift. Alvisa Street, where some of you go every Wednesday night to throw up. We hear you down there. This bird came and lived with us, this dove came and lived with us for a few days. And I think what happened is sometimes when people get married, they release doves. I'll bet you somebody at the mission got married, and this dove got confused and decided to hang out with freshmen for a few days. And finally got hungry and flew off. I'm hoping he made it home, or she. I think the beginning point of good revision is to take a bird's eye view. Let's look at the Latin here. Revision comes from Latin re, which means again, and visere, you say the V, classical Latin is better, right? Visere, which means to see. Again, to see, although in English syntax that would be to see again. I think to really revise well, you need to see differently. One of the things I like to do when I'm going to start revising a paper or a chapter or whatever is to take a longer view from way above and just look at how the essay flows. I see this with a lot of undergraduate writing, that we get some really great energy at the beginning and then there's this death point in the essay. And hopefully it picks up at the end, sometimes not. And I want to look at that. I want to look at where the energy is in anything I write. And it's too easy when you start revising just to get into the nitty-gritty of words and sentences and paragraphs and thesis statements and all the stuff I've been trying to drill into you guys. last year. I think this is where we're talking about being lost. Remember the last line of that poem is, letting the forest find you. I think a lot of a good process in writing is finding yourself in the essay. One of the things that drives me crazy, I get these portfolios from students who have to write 2 short essays a week in my class. So I've got one due next week, right? Tomorrow. They're looking at me like, yeah, what's in here? So 8 essays, 8 short essays, and sometimes when I do conferences after that, I'll say, you know, I just read 8 essays you wrote so far this quarter, and I have no idea who you are. I can't tell if you're liberal, if you're conservative, if you're feminist, if you're hedonist. I should know that after reading a few essays, right? So, and I think that's where this lostness, and sometimes you were trained not to put yourself in those, right? Never use the I. It's the stupidest rule in all of it. Yeah. So that's a beginning point of the lostness, I think. So I want to tell you 2 things. It's hard to revise, so if it feels hard, maybe you're doing it right. It's not fun to revise, whether you're talking about an essay or your life. And I want to share with you my revision horror story. This is absolutely true. This woman's name is Kathleen Jamie. She's a Scottish poet, although she's written 2 works of nature writing that you find up here that have won huge amounts of awards. She's in Great Britain, she's just famous. In America, we haven't much heard. Although she's won the John Burroughs Medal, which is American, she's won the Ryan Book Award. She's the only Brit to have won either one, let alone both. And she was doing stuff in her essays. The first one I read was this book, Findings. She was doing stuff that I kept being told when I earned my MFA in creative writing I couldn't do. I was trying to do something, and my advisors were all saying, that doesn't work. Stop it. And then I found this woman across the Atlantic in Scotland who was getting away with it, and I wanted to know how she did that. And I found out that she taught at St. Andrews University. Has anyone been there? Yeah? It's like Hogwarts. The students actually wear their robes, their academic gowns to class. And you can tell a freshman will wear the gown over both shoulders. This is unofficial, but they all do it. A sophomore lets the robe hang off the left shoulder if they're styling. They're sophomores. Juniors, the right shoulder. Seniors wear it down around the elbows, no shoulders. They're showing both sides, you know? So seniors are cool, right? Hard university to get into, but I really wanted to study with Kathleen Jamie. So I put together a really good prospectus, got some really good recommendations, applied, I got that wonderful letter, congratulations. You have been admitted to the PhD program for doctoral studies in and you know how you read the letters really quick at that point, you know. Got to the end and said, oh, by the way, Kathleen Jamie no longer teaches with us. She's taken a position at a different university. But we have this really cool history professor who does environmental history who would be good for your perspectives. So I looked him up, and he was just big. But I really wanted to go to St. Andrews, and I Googled Kathleen Jamie, and I found that she was at the University of Stirling, still in Scotland. So I called him up. Hi, I'm John Farnsworth. I was just admitted to St. Andrews because I wanted to study with Kathleen Jamie, and you stole her, and that's ruined my life. That's basically what I said. And they were really nice. They said, well, go ahead and just send us the stuff you sent to St. Andrews. Don't even change the letter. You know, just send everything right away, and we'll look at it and get back to you quickly. And they did. Within a week, they had accepted me there. So and said at the bottom, and Professor Jamie has agreed to take you on as a doctoral student. So now I was in heaven, except then I found out I kept reading. One of the things that confused me at St. Andrews is I kept going on the admissions site and I couldn't find the registration deadline, application deadline, because they don't have one. You just apply whenever you're ready to start. You're around, whatever. Doesn't matter because, it's doctoral studies. So, but then when they accept you, you have to start right away. Your acceptance dissolves. It's taken away in 3 months. You don't have to start in 3 months. There's no deferring or anything like that. And, hey, Aisha, you only have 3 years to finish. The British system is really different because you're taking up oxygen that other students can take. So there's 3 years you're done. You get what you get. So there was a little pressure there. So I called Professor Jamie, and I was like, well, I see I had to start by June. I wasn't planning to start till September like normal colleges. But what should I, just start writing some chapters? And she said, well, I don't want to read anything in the summer. So send me 3 chapters at the end of August. And I said, I could probably do 4. She said, no, 3. Well, I actually did write 4, but I only centered at 3. At the end of August, I sent 3 chapters in I thought were pretty good. The first 3 chapters of my thesis. And she responded with a 2-word email that said, start over. I had just wasted 3 months. I had written 4 spectacular chapters, and she said, start over. I go back and I said, I'm not sure I understand those 2 words. It seems like you said start over. And I also we had a little chat room for just the doctoral students in my department of English Studies. And I was like, is this some kind of British, hazing the new doctoral candidate thing? And I did get a lot there. One guy said, wow, your supervisor got back to you in 3 months. I wish mine would tell me to start over. There's nothing more pathetic than a PhD candidate working on a thesis. It's just a lonely place to be. So Kathleen finally wrote me back and she said, here's the problem is it took you 3 chapters to figure out what your book was about and to find your voice. Now, I've been ragging on my students. They're in the front row here today. I think rather recently, saying that usually the worst sentence in your compositions is what? Your first one, and your worst paragraph. And a lot of times people just, it takes a little bit of throat clearing to get to the point where it starts to happen. In my case, it took 3 chapters to really find myself in this book. Well, I had to make some serious decisions. I thought for a moment about calling St. Andrews back and seeing if that history professor was a little less yucky. But I decided, I finally made the decision, now I'm going to do this. I'm going to start over. You don't get a choice. In the American University, they call your people advisors. PhD. In Great Britain, they call it a supervisor. That's your boss, and you don't get a choice. You do what you're told. But the result was this. As Charlie told you, I've got this book coming out in November, coming to a bookstore near you, Cornell University Press. And the neat thing about this, I don't want to brag here, but it's really a good book. I mean, it's not going to embarrass me. It's so nice to have something coming out that you want people to read. But really, I mean, a lot of people don't ever publish a dissertation or thesis. We all want to. And a lot of times people end up being happy that they didn't. Like, I got my degree, I just didn't want to see that again. But in this case, the fact that I had to start over and do it right, even after wasting the entire summer, I think was the reason that it was good enough that I could go to a publisher like her now and get it published. So it's, as a teacher, I've been trying for years to figure out how to teach revision. Because there are a few teachers in the room, and you know what happens if somebody gives you a draft of an essay, and you go through, and you mark it up, and you meet with them, and you say, here's what has to happen, and they wander off out of your office with their tail between their legs, and 2 days later you get the final essay that has all the same mistakes. Am I lying? Am I, Chris? Has this happened to you? Yeah, and I was trying to wonder, why is that happening? And I guess as when I was a new teacher, I thought, well, my students are all just idiots. You know, why would anybody not fix something they knew to fix? But I think it's really because of that difficulty in revision. So I came up with this thing. It was popular about 10 years ago, this new idea, we're going to flip the classroom. Have you heard about this? And do stuff you would normally do at home, in the class. I thought, well, how can we do revision? How can we actually teach people to revise? And so I came up with a device to actually do revision in class, and I call these revision slides. And my students call it the wall of shame. So the way we've been working is the night before class, at 12:01, the day of class, like Tuesday morning, 1 minute after midnight, your essay is due. And the reason I have that is I don't want to get any 3 a.m. essays. I've seen them before. They're just not good. And students don't realize that until the next day in class. Oh, I thought I had more than one paragraph. And so 12:01 is due, and then I get up at 4:30 this morning. I'll be in bed probably by the time I'm done this talk. I go through, and what I do is I harvest sentences that really suck. And then I put them up, and together as a class, we try to revise them. And whatever we're working on that day, passive verbs, whatever it is. And somebody always gets lucky to whatever I want to work on. Sasha writes one, a good example that we can change, right? And it's never to humiliate or anything like that. It's fun, right? Not always. So, to try to do that. Now, writing instruction is relatively recent. It started at Cambridge right around the time of World War I. And it was this guy who was a British novelist that got an endowed chair. Look at the name of his chair. The King Edward VII Professor of English Literature. Kind of a nice title to have. And he was a novelist that was very popular at the time who wrote under a pseudonym Q. You ever heard of him? Q. He was very popular, and Cambridge got him. And his inaugural year, what he was going to do was he was going to give lectures on how to write, which people assume always, well, you learn that in grammar school, right? You don't not a fine concept. But he felt like it was his age. And he came up with this very famous line that has often been attributed to other people, like F. Scott Fitzgerald, who had passed this on and so on. But if you here require a practical rule of me, he's saying this during a lecture, I will present you with this. Whenever you feel an impulse to perpetrate, that's what you do with a crime, right? You perpetrate a piece of exceptionally fine writing, obey it wholeheartedly, and delete it before sending your manuscript to press. Murder your darling. And that's become kind of the famous line in college writing instruction. Murder your darling. You have to learn how to do that. Have you ever been told, other than my own students, murder your darlings? One of my students got that backwards once and said, well, you told us to kill our babies. And then one of the other students, I always get one or two really smart asses in my classes. won't tell you who they are. Some of them are in the room tonight. But I walked in one day after this discussion where the student went from murder your darlings to kill your babies. And I found this taped to the chalkboard. Remember I told you would see that head again? And I was looking at this saying, well, that's my hat. And it didn't look like me, but it was kind of like, and then I know, because I play a Martin guitar, but this is a Martin D28, and I play a triple odd 15M. It doesn't have that white binding, so I knew something was up there. Let me tell you something that's more important than, yes, you have to learn to kill your darlings. You have to throw that awful first sentence or that awful first paragraph away. Some of us have to write it anyway. Write it, then delete it once you figure out where you are in your essay. But the other important thing to do is to learn how to keep your darlings. This was a long time ago, where I grew beards. As a scuba instructor, I couldn't have a mustache. And we had crewed for a friend. This is his boat that I used to race on. It's a 37-footer. My boat now. But we had taken it from Monterey down to the Channel Islands. He had a son who was, what, he was 8 years old, David. And so he figured, 10? He was way too young for this trip, whatever it was. So Carol was in charge of kind of keeping him, protecting him from me after 3 days at sea. But when we came up, the boat didn't have radar, and we got as far north as Point Willow, and we ran into this thick fog. We couldn't see beyond the bow. We really couldn't. Carol was a little queasy, so she went down to bed. And Charlie and I, the guy that owned the boat, we spent the whole night up, listening. You can't stop when you're out to sea, because the other boat's going to run over you anyway. So listening, trying to see. Both went through the whole night. I had every piece of clothing I had with me on the way. I had a turtleneck, a light fleece, a heavy fleece, a jacket, then my foul weather gear over that, and I was still cold. And then the morning, finally the sun comes out, the fog burns away, Carol pops up and goes, "How is everybody?" And my friend Charlie said, "I want to take a picture of that." How to keep your darlings. Couple just really little tips on revision. Composition, you should think the writing process has 2 elements. Composition, getting that first draft out, and then revision, right? And when you compose, to really do a good job, to really be creative at it, even if you're not doing creative writing, you have to turn off the inner critic. You have to turn off that voice that says, "God, that's not a sentence. God, that's crap." Right? You can't write if that's yelling in your ear. This is that's in Baja, the island of Isla Espiritu Santo. It's a natural stone formation they call La Máscara, the mask. And this is me pretending to be scared. So, turning off all those scary monsters. But when you revise, you have to turn that inner critic back on. You have to do it from a critical stance. How do you do that? Here's my recommendation. This works. All right? We're not even going to charge you extra tuition for this. Make a space, a different space, for when you start doing critical thinking. If you composed in your dorm room, go to the library. Get out of where you were. It's best to put a day or two between it. I know students don't often think in those terms. Like, the writing process is you start at about 10:30 composing, and by midnight you're hoping you're revising, right? And by 3 a.m. you're done, whether the essay's done or not, right? This is Friday Harbor. They have something called the Whiteley Center, and I was last August a Whiteley scholar, and I have a new book that's behind the one I showed you, but I wanted to do the final revision where I'd sit down. I'd been revising all summer, and just to get away in a different spot. And we often think of writing retreats as that's where you go and you compose the book. And what I want to suggest is, the time where you really need to retreat is the revision. Because that's where you have to start listening to that critic that's telling you that this sentence doesn't work. And it's better to do that in a really good, creative space for you. I don't want you to take this next slide literally. It has a good point, but this is what the poets say in MFA programs. Draft while drunk, but revise while sober. Now don't, no! I've noticed my Thursday essays are never as good as my Tuesday essays. Right? But I think there's a neat point there about just the sobriety part of it. One of the worst things you can do is revise late at night when you're tired. That's when you can compose. Fine. Find your good time. Find your high energy time to revise. Okay? This is a Western tiger swallowtail I took from my desk in Varsity. I didn't have to get out of my chair to get that bug. Finally, one last thing. I think one last thing. No, almost. One last thing. The question is, should you do your own work? Teachers are always saying, do your own work, right? Now, the book that I've got coming out, so Kathleen went through 2 drafts with me. Then I had to defend it. They hired an outside reviewer from the University of Bath Spa, who was a published nature writer, and an internal reviewer, an Australian novelist, who went through the book and then grilled me on it for like 6 hours to see if I was really going to get my doctorate. And then gave me all their revisions. And then I had to revise it and send it to them. And then I took it basically to an editor at Cornell who read it and decided it might be worth it. So she put it into peer review. So 2 people, colleagues, the one thing I know is that they both were recipients of the Burroughs Medal, which one of these days I want to. I found out who one of them was because she outed herself afterward when the book was accepted for publication. But I had to basically respond to all their critiques. Then the book went to the board of editors. Then it went to the science board. Then they finally assigned it to a production editor and a copy editor. So 12 professionals helped me revise that book. When you read this, and you will, yeah? I'm going to seem a lot smarter than I am because I had help. I would never want to send a book out that I revised on my own. You can see how bad I really am as a writer. But why not have a second set of eyes when you do your work? Right? I think you need that. I think you deserve that. And sometimes you don't see mistakes that are so glaring that the teacher sees right away, right? They just jump out. Maybe you'll have a friend or a roommate or whatever who do that. Those are California condors that I took. There's a chapter about my time working with restoration down in Baja in the new book Kirsten's going to read. Questions? Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, ASG, for this. Oh, look, we have a question.
Well, that's your favorite part of
Wow. Paul has to be. Is that it? I think the relationships. In my department, environmental studies and sciences, my colleagues are really some of my best friends. I don't want to embarrass you. People come sailing with me, and it's more than just going to work and dealing with that. It really is a special relationship. The relationships I've had with students, especially the students who I get closest to, are the people who do peer educating with me. One of my peer educators, Katie Diggs, right here. worked with me on a couple of classes, but just all those relationships. People that come to office hours. I just love every part of it except grading. I have read a lot of really bad essays in 21 years. I'm going to enjoy not doing that. But just, I think it's the people. Any others?
What characters do you have in store?
Well, I'm hoping, Carol works for Facebook, so she's got, what, another 3 or 4 years before she's going to retire. So that's going to be what I'm calling book 3, is going to be an adventure. At one point, I'd like, our sailboat in Sausalito right now is going to go to Seattle, so that when she's there, we can kind of be in Seattle, and when we can be on the island, we can do that. But ultimately, I want to take that boat to Baja, sail it down, and then be there in the winter when it's really up in Washington, and then spend our summers when it's really hot in Baja, up at the cabin. So that's the plan. I'm looking for crew. Maybe you and Henry. All right. Let me put it to an end. Oh, one last question. One book. Yeah, Codes of Departure. Okay. One book. The book I'm really, well, I really get into journals. Like, I love Thoreau's Walden, but I love his journals. I think the book that I'm really fixating on right now that is somehow going to be factored into what I do with book number 3, and I'm just at the beginning, is Annie Dillard's book, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. And that's from the 70s, right? It won a Pulitzer. It's a book that just blows me away. I've read it 3 or 4 times. Edward Abbey's Desert Solitaire, 1968. I did one of my master's theses on that. You might like that more. I don't know, those two. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming.